Hey, welcome to Pineview Parenting. We are on lesson 6 or session 6 of the Adventures in Parenting curriculum. We've gone through responding, preventing, monitoring, and now we're going to do mentoring, and there's one more after mentoring. So today we are looking at mentoring your child and supporting and encouraging them to get the desired outcome behaviors that we want, which is always easier said than done. But question, when you were growing up, did you have a special person in your life? Think about childhood. Did you have like a special person in your life that gave you advice or you kind of hung out with? And for this question, not so much mom or dad, but maybe aunts, a relative, a friend older than you. Did you have someone like that when you were a kid?
Yeah, like I had a couple of aunts that I was pretty tight with. So.
What would you do with them? Would you spend time with them or go on trips with them, or what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, well, the one was like one of those spur of the moment crazy people where you just take off to a different state on the spur of a moment. You know,
nice.
Let's go.
All right.
But, yeah. No, I went to their churches with them and spent. I mean, they had kids my similar age, but like they weren't my mom, so like they were cooler. You know, we could talk. I would tell them things that I wasn't to tell my mom.
Okay, right, very good, cool. Well, if you had someone like that, those were mentors, is what they were. I had a couple mentors that, and when we're kids, we don't realize those are mentors. They're just people we like to hang out with, and they're older, you know. And so I had my uncle Ron. You said you had an aunt. I had an uncle. He's very quirky. He's a interesting guy. He's 70. He's still alive. He's 75 maybe now, something like that. So when I was, a teenager, so he would have been 55 in his 50s or whatever. My parents didn't really do a whole lot of traveling. We didn't go on trips or anything, but my Uncle Ron did. He was single. He'd been single his whole life. So that he actually just got married about 4 years ago at 71, first time. But he was single, and so me and a couple of my cousins, we went on road trips with him, and mom and dad were fine with that. He was not a bad influence. They weren't afraid of anything like that. And so we would go on these road trips. We went one road trip. We lived in Michigan. We went across Lake Michigan on the SS Badger, that big barge boat thing. Went across Lake Michigan on the SS Badger. We rented a car. We drove to the Grand Canyon and then came back under the United States, the southern states, and then back up to Michigan. It was about a 10-day trip. That was just tons of fun. And I did a couple of road trips with my Uncle Ron. I did bicycling with him, that sort of thing. But as a kid, you don't realize that they're really having a pretty profound impact on you. I remember I would just observe how my uncle would deal with difficult situations, little things, like even in a restaurant, they get his order wrong, right? How he would deal with it. And it was different than other people I would observe, different than my dad, different than my mom, different than my friends or my friends' parents or whatever. Some of my friends' parents, if something like that happened, they'd get their order wrong at McDonald's, they just flip a lid, and they, how dare you get my order wrong or whatever. My Uncle Ron was very calm, very cool, collected, but he also still would have a voice. And so if there was an order wrong at McDonald's, he would tell them, but he was quiet, it was calm. He wasn't throwing a fit. He wasn't having an adult temper tantrum or anything like that. But he wasn't intentionally teaching me lessons. He wasn't like, okay, Rod, watch how I do this. He was just living life. And that really is what a mentor does. They just live life with impressionable kids, and the kids just learn lessons by observing. That's really all a mentor is. Now, if you take mentoring and you're proactive with it, you can not invent, but you can proactively make those situations happen. And they're watching you, but you're not instructing them like a teacher. You're just living life in front of your kids. And parents, we can be the best mentors that our kids can have. It's really great that our kids may have good mentors, friends, parents, if they're good influences, aunts, uncles, whatever. older friends, that sort of thing. But really, if you think about it, the biggest influence that we had as children and as our kids have is mom and dad. And it's amazing how much they learn when we're not even intentionally teaching. And that can be really good and sometimes not so good. And so whether we realize it or not, or like it or not, they're watching us. They're watching us like hawks. They're watching us how we talk on the phone. They're watching us how we complain about work. They're watching us how we deal with relational issues, with legal issues, with financial things. They're watching us, they're watching us, they're watching us. And whether we like it or not, they're going to model us in one way or another. I've been told I am my father, but differently. My dad was different. He had a different mindset kind of than I did. I kind of went white collar career. My dad was a blue collar, and he was uneducated. He was like a factory worker. Always took care of the family. He was intelligent, but he was uneducated. And for whatever reason, I was interested in education, so I went the other way. But as far as my personality, how I say things, one of my nephews says that I laugh like my dad. Even, and we were in a car once, and Dad's been dead now for about 4 years, and I was laughing. And it's almost kind of like a little airy, kind of wheezy, almost kind of laugh sometimes. And my nephew said, you sound just like Grandpa, and whatever it is. It was kind of cute. But whether we like it or not, our kids are going to model us, whether it's how we talk with people or how we laugh. It's just what it is. And so knowing that ahead of time, or knowing that while we're raising our kids, we'll be much better off to recognize that and to move forward in a positive way. Okay. What mentors do. Mentors help kids really reach their full potential. Mentors help kids reach their full potential, which includes, and I kind of alluded to it, making mistakes, crying with them when something bad happens, sharing tears with them, and celebrating their successes and their victories and that sort of thing. So we can say this for that number one there with the fill in the blanks. A mentor provides these things: support, guidance, friendship, and respect. That's what a mentor does. Now, a mentor would be not the same as a parent. Now, a parent can be a mentor, but really a mentor, I would almost argue, can't really be a parent, especially if the parent is already involved, so to speak. You can have father figures and mother figures, that sort of thing. But a parent can be a mentor, but if the model is functioning the way it should, the kids should have their parents who mentor them, but they should also have mentors who are not their parents, if that makes sense. That's what I had growing up. And again, you don't realize it when you're a kid, but it does help them very much because they can see different perspectives. And so there can be, oh, gal, like that mentor handled that in a way that I wouldn't want to handle it. I've seen mom handle that kind of situation better. So they're aligning their worldview. They're aligning their relationship with the world and themselves through these lessons, basically these dings, these checkpoints as they're going through life. And so a good mentor is going to do these things: provide support, guidance, friendship, and respect is what a mentor is going to do. It's kind of funny, in the 80s, there's been some formal, I guess you could say kind of professional, I guess you could say, mentoring programs that have come about, like Big Brothers Big Sisters, for example, is a big one. Boys Club of America. A little older one would be like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, that sort of thing. Those are all mentorship programs. It's just doing life. It's just doing things with impressionable kids to try to help move them along in a positive direction. A lot of what we do at Pineview here is mentoring. A lot of it is. I do life skills teaching in the gym every Wednesday. That's not mentoring. Now, they may get some mentoring from me, but really that's more teaching. That's more formal teaching. Here's a philosophy, or here's an issue, or here's a challenge. here's how to understand it, and here's what to do with it, is basically it. That's really not mentoring. Mentoring would look like, hey, I'm going to the grocery store, why don't you come with me? That's more mentoring. Hey, last night we took some boys fishing. I think Willie went fishing. I think he did.
Probably.
I think he did. I don't know.
You're going fishing, he's there.
Yeah, I saw pictures. Yeah. I'll have to look. But anyway, that's like last night. It was Cassandra, Lewis, and I think one or two other staff, and not all the boys, but it was some of the boys. Hey, we're going fishing. You know, you've had a good day. You know, behavior wise, whatever. Come on with us. That's mentoring. And so mentoring, it's amazing. You actually have, like Pineview, for example, if you took percentages from teaching and counseling, as important as they may be, that's really a small percentage, really. Each of the boys, they see an individual counselor once a week for 45 minutes or whatever. They have family counseling if they can, if it's applicable. Then they have group teachings every day and the other group teachings. So I could add the hours up, but if you compare those hours to the many hours of mentoring in the houses, having dinner, even going to school, that sort of thing, mentoring hours are a lot more. And so mentoring really is really important. And when we realize that, and we try to train our staff and our house parents to be at least aware of their influence, because not all the staff have formal counseling or social work training. So we have some training that we do with them, and then their conduct and how they deal with stuff and their attitudes and words, it's really a good example to the boys. So they're more mentors. I'm a mentor, but my primary role would be counselor teacher. But when I'm walking from the office with a boy over to the gym to get ready for teaching, I'm mentoring for that 5 minutes or whatever. So, all right, very good. Let's see here. A mentor is kind of like being a coach. It's kind of like being a coach of a sports team. If you think about how a coach functions, they invest in the kids, they teach the kids, they're training the kids, they're showing the team, okay, here's a play that's worked, here's a play that hasn't worked, here's the team we're going up against this weekend. Here's what they're good at. Here's what they're not good at. They're teaching. They're building up strengths in their team. They're pointing out weaknesses and how to improve those weaknesses, etc., etc., etc. But what's fun about a coach is when it's game day, they're on the sideline, right? So a coach all week long is pouring into their kids. They're pouring into their kids, pouring into their team. But when it's game time, the coach has to step back and let them play and let them go. The coach cannot jump in and play the game for them. Could you imagine? Could you imagine if you're watching like an NFL and like the quarterback's just not doing a good job or misses a play or something, and the coach, takes his headset off and says, "Here, let me show you." And then during the game, the coach is behind the center in his suit or whatever he's wearing. He's saying, "This is how you do it." And actually plays. That'd be insane. It's not what a coach does. A coach teaches and invests, but when it's game time, now he's there. He's there. He's observing. He's hollering. He's saying, "Go get him. Do this. Don't do that. What are you doing? Come here." All these things. He's there, but he's not playing the game. Really, that's how mentoring parents ought to be. I'll never forget. I have this picture. Oh, it's in my video. My son, I'll never forget. So when I bought him this race car, so he didn't do sports and he wasn't doing like plays and theatrics anymore, but he was in high school, so he needed an extracurricular activity of some sort. And then the pandemic hit. We had this vacation money saved up. There's no vacation, right? Not in 2020 and 2021. So we had this vacation money. Summertime's coming. What do? Well, naturally, you buy a race car. That's what everyone should do. So we bought a race car, and it was for the summer. And I told the boy, here's what we're going to do. And, I took him over to see the race car before I bought it, just to see what he would think. He was 14, right? He's, I think, 17 in this picture. He was barely 15. No, he was 14 when we went and looked at it. And then when we actually purchased it, he had just turned 15. And he'd driven a little bit with Dad out in fields and stuff, but never driven a real car. This is a stick shift, right? Clutch and all. So I'm telling them, bud, I'm gonna have to teach you how to do this. I'll teach you how to drive it. It's gonna be you. There's only one seat. I can't sit with them, right? And so what we had to do was I had to teach him. I had to tell him, you do this, you do that. Here's what to do. Here's what not to do. Now, for the first couple rides, I did actually crouch down. I'm like crouched in there. There's no seat. It was so uncomfortable. It was terrible. The doors don't open. I had to crawl through the window. It was terrible. But my car is much bigger, so I can get in and out of this one. But it's just a little car, powerful, little fast car. It's an 84 Toyota Celica. That's what this is. It's a mini modified. Anyway, so he's 15 years old, and I'll never forget. I had trained him. I had taught him. We'd gone on the back dirt roads, and I taught him how to, do the clutch and all that, how to shift the gears and all that. But when it came to race day, it was our first race day. I'll never forget. I'm standing outside the car here, and he's sitting in. And my little 15-year-old boy, he's got his helmet on. He's got his visor up. He's got his little gloves on, and he's like, there's other cars, and it's loud, and he like looks up at me, and he has these eyes of excitement but fear. And at that moment, I had to let go. And he has that little 5-point harness, and this is a fire-resistant suit, so that brings fears into, any parent, that sort of thing. And so, but when it was time for him to go, I could not drive that car for him. I could not get on the track with him. I just had to let him go. And he did, and he raced, and he had some crashes, and he had some bumps and a broken thumb in one of his races and that sort of thing. But he did very well. He won Rookie of the Year his first year, and then he won that class championship that year as well. But that first race, I'll never forget. It's burned into my brain, that look of, am I going to be okay, Dad? And I just was encouraging him and slapped him on the back and on the chest and said, go get him, boy. And okay.
Not to interrupt, but wrestling is a very similar sport. As far as it's your kid out there on that mat.
Right.
And Willie started when he was 5.
Yeah.
So, littlest thing, and you just got to be like.
Yeah.
And you're watching your kid from over here, and it's a very independent sport. So, your kid against all this, he doesn't have a team, it's his little old self.
Right. Oh, it's terrifying. And, and it'd be crazy if a parent were to run out onto the mat and say, here's how you do it. Boom. And
you totally want to, especially when he's 5.
You totally want to. Oh, absolutely. So that is the role of a mentor. A parent mentor, they train, they teach, they invest, they encourage. But then there's got to be a moment where, go get them. And I'm there, and I'm watching, and I was so nervous watching him go around that track, and he was loosening up the rear end, and it was so scary. It was so scary. But then when he came off, and he didn't win his first race, but he was there, and he finished the race, and he's all excited, and I'm all excited, and that's fun. That's kind of a good word picture of what a good mentor is. And so if we can do that with our kids, and it's not just sports. I've taught you how to do relational things. I've told you and taught you how to have good friends and what kind of friends not to have. Now when we go out, when we're at the park or when we go fishing or whatever it is, now it's time for you to take everything I've taught you and for you to make those decisions, which sometimes can be hard to do. And there'll be mistakes made. He crashed his car sometimes. I'm sure Willie didn't win every match. Relationally, you name it, any aspect of life, they're going to have bumps and bruises and crashes. And as good mentors, as coach parents, we need to bring them in and say, when River broke his thumb, it's all right, bud. We'll get back out there. It's okay. We'll be all right. You're there supporting them, and that's really what a good parent mentor is. Okay. All right, let's see here. Moving on. Let's see here. So mentors, they do the same thing as a coach. They develop the child's strengths. They share the child's interests. They offer advice. They offer support. They give praise. They listen. They really just be a friend to the kid. Number 2 there in your blanks, it says mentors know that small failures is the blank, precede major successes. Why do you think that is? Why do you think mentors understand that small failures will lead to more major successes. Why do you think that is?
I mean, it's kind of where the lessons learned. Like, if you don't try and fail, then you got to learn the skills, like, to succeed.
That's exactly right. So, really, failures really aren't failures. They're lessons. That's really what it is. When my boy hit the wall in his race car, we were not done racing. It wasn't like, well, you hit the wall, you messed up, never racing again. No, you fix the car, you bang out the dents, you wrap up your thumb, and you get back out there. You know, you keep moving, you keep going. So absolutely right. So those small failures, they really often precede major successes. And the boy hit the wall early season, and he still came back, and he had that major success of Rookie of the Year and championship for that year. What an amazing thing. So very good. Okay. All right, let's see here. Now this is kind of almost like a no-brainer, but I just want to verbalize this. What do you think is the number one key to being a good mentor? What do you think you have to do? And just think very basic and simple. But what do you think some people forget? And unfortunately, dads, male role models, forget this probably before ladies do. But what do you think is the number one key to being a good mentor? What do you have to do?
To be there.
You got to spend time with them.
Yeah,
you got to be there. Yeah. That's really about it. And when we say be there, I don't mean you're sitting there in your lazy boy watching the game with your kid in the room. That's not being there. That's being physically present, which could be what's called detached. Detachment actually is more painful than physical absence. There's been some times in my life where my father was somewhat detached. Some of it was he worked a lot, and a lot of blue-collar guys, they have to get that overtime. It's just what it is. And so he would be there, but there'd be times where it didn't really feel like he was really there. But when he was to engage with us, he was all in. So that was good. He was a good dad in that way. I had other friends. I remember his best friend I had, his dad literally would come home. His wife would give him his plate of food. He wouldn't even stop. He would pass through the kitchen, take his plate of food, go into his bedroom, close the door. So he was physically in the house, but he was absolutely not present. He was detached, which psychologically, which is amazing, is more damaging than if they were physically gone, like if the dad would be somewhere else. Because psychologically, you have a constant rejection if there's a detached parent. If they're physically absent, yeah, there may be a rejection, but it would be an initial rejection, and then psychologically you would actually begin to heal from that. But when it's reoccurring daily, it never heals. So that's kind of a scary thing. It's important that you simply do things together. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be a huge event every time. It could be, hey, I'm going to the grocery store. I do this with my daughter even now. Hey, I'm going to go to the gas station, or I'm going to go to Taco Bell. Are you in? Most of the time she's like, yeah. I try to invent reasons or create reasons to have her come along, even if I really don't want to, A couple nights ago, over the weekend, we had a bonfire. My sisters came over, and we had a really nice family time. But it was bigger family time. So what I did, let's see, today is Thursday? Tuesday night, I built a little campfire, and we have a little fire ring in the backyard. So I built a little campfire, and I said to my daughter, I didn't really ask her, to be fair. I said, hey, come on outside with me, that kind of thing. Instead of saying, would you like to spend some time with me? I say, hey, come on outside for a minute, And sometimes what I'll do is, if they're, I'm busy playing a game, or I'm busy with this, it's kid stuff, whatever. I'll say 5 minutes. Well, 5 minutes always turns into 15. It's just guaranteed. So I say, just 5 minutes, No, all right, I can do 5 minutes, And then, it usually turns out to be a nice little time, and we watch the bats come out. We have bats in our eaves of our house. So watch the bats come out. We started to watch the stars come out, and it was a nice 20-minute, maybe half hour, just little time. We're doing nothing. We're just sitting there. It's a fire, but it's little things like that our kids feel wanted, they feel connected. That's really what mentoring as a parent is about. So you just have to spend time with them. You just have to do things, create excuses to spend time with your kids. Sometimes it's in their world, like sitting down with them when they're playing a game and start asking them about their video game. That's one way to do it. Or it's you, hey, I'm going to go to the store. Come on with me. That sort of thing. So create mentoring opportunities. It's not that hard. It just takes a little work. It takes a little proactivity. This is interesting. I want to read this. It's kind of neat. This is not in your notes. I just thought it was really interesting. I sometimes like statistics. So this is interesting. This comes out from Big Brothers Big Sisters. It was a impact study in the 90s. It says children who have mentors are 46% less likely to use illegal drugs. Half. It cuts it in half, the probability to use illegal drugs. 27% less likely to use alcohol. And 52% less likely to skip school than kids that didn't have mentors. Now this would start with the parents, and they would have other older good influences, mentors as well. Those are pretty high numbers. If it was like 10%, 8%, it'd be like, okay, well, it's kind of okay. But these are big numbers. 46% less likely to use illegal drugs, more than a quarter, 27% less likely to use alcohol, and then 52% they'll stay in school. So 48% or 52% are staying in school just because they have mentors. Isn't that crazy? I thought that was pretty wild. Those are pretty high numbers. I thought it was pretty good. All right. How much time we got? Okay, we're doing good. All right, on your fill in the blank there, number 3, these are some things to keep in mind. Number 1 is be honest. Be honest about your strengths and your weaknesses. Sometimes as parents, there may be a pressure that we need to know everything. We need to be the answer person. We need to know exactly how to do every little thing in every little part of life. What about this? What about... And if you don't know, say you don't know. It's okay. I don't know, but let's find out together. That really is a really good response to some of those harder questions. Be honest about your strengths, about your weaknesses. I would be a little careful with boundaries with this. Sometimes kids will ask about our past. Well, what did you do when you were a teenager? Oh, geez, So I rarely get into details, and that's not being dishonest, that's being wise. Because obviously sometimes our kids, depending on their age and their maturity level, they would hear us say, well, I did this, but don't you do that. Well, they're going to see how you turned out and be like, well, mom did that, dad did that, I think it'll be okay. All they're going to hear is permission. Even if you say, but don't do it, and even here's the consequences. So basically what I'll do is when my kids, they don't really anymore, obviously they're older, but when they were younger, I do remember they were asking me some specific questions and stuff about when I was a kid or teenager, because their friends were doing certain things or whatever. And they'd ask me, well, did you do this? Did you do that? Or whatever. And I would just say something to the effect of, well, I really did some things that I really regret. And kind of leave it right there. I did some things that I really regret that I wish I hadn't done. But thankfully, I learned my lesson and I would never do those things again. And that they'll use their imagination at that point. They'll use their imagination, like, okay, well, that means they may have done this, but they don't really want to talk about it. It must have been bad enough to where I need to avoid that thing. Doesn't always work that way, but I bring that out. Be honest, but have your boundaries too. And depending on how old our kids are, their maturity level, you may want to have stricter boundaries on that as they're younger, and then open them up a little bit as they get older. And then, of course, when they're adults, I think it's okay to share more with them, but you just have to be careful and know your own kids for that. So be honest about your own strengths and weaknesses while keeping healthy boundaries would be a good way, I'd say. Okay. Second one is respect your child's thoughts and opinions. Does respect always mean you agree? No, of course not. Someone can tell me something, whether it's my kids or not, and I will respect their thoughts and opinions, but I may not agree, and that's okay. Really, a good way to communicate respect is simply listening. If they, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or here's what I think about this. Just before responding, we talked about that, responding, reacting. That was I think it was the first lesson. Responding, reacting. Allow them to talk. Allow them to get their opinions out. They'll feel heard. They'll feel respected. And then you can formulate a good response after you've heard them. We had a boy here at Pineview. He just graduated from the program. And usually what I like to do is at the end of a counseling session, if I know it's the last session, I'll ask the boy and their guardian what were some good things, what were some bad things, what were kind of a recap or review, mainly of the therapy side of Pineview, but we'll talk about his Pineview in general too. And when we're talking about the therapy stuff, the boy said, in my counseling sessions, so he does individual counseling with another counselor and then the family with me, he said, in my counseling sessions individually and my family, he said, it was the only time I really felt heard. That's what he said. And that's pretty powerful. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking, well, why would he say that? And it dawned on me, it wasn't because the staff weren't hearing him. It was because mom was hearing him. That was it. Staff will listen. I'll listen, right? But he's like, I don't really care if staff listens. But basically, the counselors and myself, we asked him questions, and then almost, what's the right word? Enforced is too strong. We controlled the conversation. That's a good way to say it. We controlled the conversation kind of as a coach or as a mediator. When he was asked the question, we insisted that he spoke or answered without mom interrupting, because that was kind of how their dynamic was. They didn't have a real good communication relationship. So he would say 3 words and she's already down his throat, rah, 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 And so what I would do is I would ask a question, she would answer, and then there was a couple times where I said, oh, hold on, I'd like to hear what he has to say, nicely, but I was mediating, controlling kind of the conversation, and I realized that because I knew he had been heard before by staff and our mentors and his other counselor, but that's what it was. It was the key. Mom heard me. That's what it was. Then he felt heard. I thought it was pretty powerful because it was a training, almost exercise for mom to respect his words. That's really what that was. So anyway, so as good mentor parents, we are to respect our children's thoughts and opinions, even if we really don't agree, because we're so tempted to correct so quickly. But if we do that, we may just shut them down and cause division is really what we're doing. Okay, there's one little note in that point in your book. It says just what we talked about, respect your child's thoughts and opinions. And it says without judging them. I don't personally care for the phrase judging them. What I would say is respect your child's thoughts and opinions while judging well. That's really how I would say that, because it can be misinterpreted as don't judge me. In other words, don't tell me what to do, don't question my opinions or whatever, when really that's not possible. As human beings, we judge everything. We do, whether we like it or not. We judge McDonald's food, we judge a class, we judge a person's character, we judge a person's conduct, appearance. I mean, it's what we do. I mean, we're constantly rating stuff. We're constantly putting a value on something. This is a good thing, this is a bad thing. We talked about influences for our kids. We're talking about mentoring. So obviously we're judging what types of relationships are good for our kids. So I would say respect our child's thoughts and opinions while judging those thoughts and opinions and our kid well. That's what I would say with that, because that is our job. It's to put a value on worldview, relationships, etc. Okay. Letter C there. Support, this is the things to keep in mind with mentoring. Support your child's interests and strengths. Support your child's interests and strengths. one thing that I've done in a couple different organizations that I've been involved with is I would come in to the organization, and a couple times I was on the leadership team, and it was pretty apparent that there was good people there, but they were simply in the wrong position, and there needed to be a little shuffling around. And it was interest based, basically. It's amazing. If you want a good employee, let them function in their interests, because then they're passionate about it. I want to do that. Oh, I'm excited to do that. If you're constantly keeping your thumb on them, like as a supervisor or as a parent, you need to do it this way, and kind of really putting your thumb on them, then what you do is you stifle their character, you stifle their creativity, their self-esteem, etc. So we really want to support our child's interests and strengths. And tell you what, I have, you know what anime is? Cartoons. I have watched a lot of anime. It is not my thing. It's not my thing. But for whatever reason, my kids are into it. And there's some anime that you shouldn't watch. It's like adult type anime, right? But there's just normal teenagery type anime. It's just not my jam. Who cares? My kids were interested in it. It wasn't a bad thing. So guess who was watching anime right along with them? Dad. So that was a way that I entered their world. I supported their interests and strengths, and it really did do a lot of good connection. We had some good family time really around anime of all things. So that's letter C. Support your kids' interests and strengths. And then along with that, and I did this too, letter D, introduce your child to things you like. So yes, enter their world, ask them about the video game, watch anime with them, whatever. But also, hey, let's go do this thing. I've always liked doing this thing. Maybe you'll like it too. Let's try this out. Let's do this hobby. I've always liked doing them. And you may be surprised. They may actually kind of enjoy what you're into, which may be surprising. And it's a win-win if they are. It doesn't always work that way. Usually you can tell if they're just humoring you, if they hang around you for a little bit and then they just kind of slowly peter away. Fine, well, it didn't work. That's okay. Doesn't mean you can't do things you like. It just means in this mentoring mode, if you're trying to invent or create ways to spend time with your kids, do both. Enter their world, but also invite them into yours, whatever that may be. All right, very good. I think that kind of wraps that lesson up. Any questions on any of that? I think I got everything that I wanted to say. All right, very good. All right, well, that is lesson number 6, mentoring your child and supporting them. Next week, we're going to do modeling, and that's it. That is our last lesson for this course. So very good. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you later.